My parents cut me off for choosing med school over the family business. Now they're begging me to save my sister's life. But I discovered a secret that changed everything. I never thought I'd hear my parents' voices again. Not after what they did to me. Not after they made it crystal clear that I wasn't their son anymore. But 7 years after they cut me off, they showed up out of nowhere, crying, desperate, and begging me to save my sister's life. And the worst part? I could actually help. Let me back up. My name's Jake, and I grew up in a very traditional, very image-conscious family. My parents, Linda and Mark, were the type who cared more about appearances than actual relationships. My little sister, Emily, was the golden child, smart, talented, and most importantly, obedient. I, on the other hand, was the disappointment. At 19, I made a choice that changed everything. I refused to go into the family business. My dad owned a successful chain of auto shops, and he expected me to take over one day. But I wanted to be a doctor. The idea of working with cars my whole life made me miserable, so I told them I was going to med school instead. That conversation ended with my dad yelling that I was dead to them. My mom refused to even look at me. And just like that, I was cut off. No financial support, no calls, no acknowledgement that I even existed. Emily was the only one who tried to keep in touch, but eventually, my parents got to her too. I stopped hearing from her, and I figured that was that. Fast forward 7 years. I worked my way through school, took out loans, and just finished my residency. Life wasn't easy, but I made it. And then, out of nowhere, my parents called me. Not just once, dozens of missed calls, texts, voicemails. I thought it was some kind of mistake, but then I finally picked up. And what I heard made my stomach drop. Jake, it's Emily. She's dying. You're the only one who can save her. I felt frozen. 7 years of silence, and now they suddenly needed me? I gripped the phone. What are you talking about? My voice came out colder than I expected, but I didn't care. My mom sniffled on the other end. Emily has a rare blood disorder. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and we've tested everyone in the family. No one's a match. I swallowed hard. I knew where this was going. You're her last hope, Jake. My dad added, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. Please, son. If you ever loved your sister, you'll get tested. A million emotions crashed over me at once. Anger, hurt, confusion, and worst of all, guilt. Because despite everything, I did love Emily. She was the only one who had ever really cared about me in that house. And now she was dying? I took a deep breath, trying to think straight. Where is she? She's in the hospital. My mom answered quickly, as if afraid I'd change my mind. We can send you the details. I'll go, I interrupted. But not for you. I'm doing this for Emily. There was silence, then a relieved sob from my mom. Thank you, Jake. Thank you? I hung up without saying another word. I didn't trust them. Not after everything they did. But Emily? If there was even a chance I could save her, I had to try. What I didn't expect was just how deep my parents' lies went. The next morning, I drove 3 hours to the hospital where Emily was staying. I barely slept, running through every possible scenario in my head. Would she even want to see me? Was she really that sick? Was this some kind of manipulation? When I walked into her hospital room, all my doubts disappeared. Emily looked awful. Pale, frail, thinner than I'd ever seen her. But when she saw me, her tired eyes lit up. Jake! Her voice was weak, but she smiled. I felt something tighten in my chest. 7 years apart, and she still looked at me like I was her big brother, not some stranger. Hey, Em. I forced a smile and sat by her bed. I hear you've been causing trouble. She let out a breathy laugh. Yeah, I have a habit of doing that. Then her face turned serious. I didn't know they were going to call you. They wouldn't even say your name for years. I was shocked when they told me. Yeah, well, either did I. I glanced at the door, expecting our parents to burst in at any second. So, this transplant. I'm really the only match? Emily nodded. Yeah. We checked everyone. Even distant relatives. It's you or nothing. That hit me harder than I expected. I reached for her hand. Then I'll do it. Her lip trembled. Thank you, Jake. I know Mom and Dad don't deserve this, but I'm not doing it for them. I squeezed her hand. I'm doing it for you. She smiled again, but before she could say anything else, the door swung open. My parents walked in, looking like they'd aged a decade since I last saw them. "Jake," my dad said, relief flooding his face. "Thank you for coming." I stood up. "I'll get tested. That's all I'm promising." They nodded quickly, but something felt off. Like they were hiding something. I ignored the feeling and let the doctors take my blood for testing. What I didn't expect was for the results to reveal a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. The blood test was supposed to be a formality. A quick confirmation that I was a match, and then we'd move forward with the transplant. But when the doctor walked into the waiting room with a strange look on his face, I knew something was wrong. "Jake," he said carefully, glancing at my parents, who sat stiffly beside me. "We got your results back, and you're not a match." Silence. I blinked. "What? That doesn't make sense. You said I was Emily's last chance." The doctor hesitated. "I agree. Given that you're full siblings, the chances were high. But the results are clear. You're not biologically compatible." My stomach twisted. I turned to my parents. "How is that possible?" My mom's face had gone pale, her hands shaking in her lap. My dad, on the other hand, looked like a deer in headlights. "Mom?" My voice was sharp now. "Dad?" Then, my dad exhaled shakily and rubbed his face. "Jake, there's something we never told you." A cold wave of dread crept up my spine. "Just say it," I demanded. My mom let out a choked sob, covering her mouth. My dad looked me in the eye and said, "You're not our biological son." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "What?" My voice barely came out. We adopted you when you were a baby," my mom whispered. "We never planned to tell you, but when Emily got sick we thought maybe it wouldn't matter." I couldn't speak. My own parents, no, the people I thought were my parents, had kept this from me my entire life. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "So you disowned me, cut me off for 7 years, and now you come crawling back, not because you care, but because you needed my DNA?" My mom sobbed harder. My dad looked away. Neither denied it. I felt sick. I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't know where I was going, but one thing was clear: this family, this entire life I thought I had, was built on a lie. And I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive them. I don't even remember walking out of the hospital. One second, I was standing there, staring at my so-called parents, and the next, I was outside, gasping for air like I'd been punched in the gut. I wasn't their son. 7 years of being ignored, abandoned, treated like I didn't exist, and the whole time, I really didn't. Not to them. I was nothing more than a convenience when they needed me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Emily's name on the screen. My thumb hovered over the answer button. Emily. She was innocent in all of this. No matter how angry I was, she was still my sister, the only person who had ever really cared about me. And she was dying. I swallowed hard and answered. "Hey, Jake." Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you okay?" "No. I don't know." I exhaled shakily. "Did you know?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I found out a few years ago." I clenched my jaw. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I wanted to," she said quickly. "But Mom and Dad, they made me swear not to. They said it didn't change anything." "Didn't change anything?" I let out a bitter laugh. "They abandoned me like I was nothing. Then the second they needed something, they suddenly remembered I existed." "I know," she whispered. "And I hate them for that. But Jake, I don't care if we're not blood. You are my brother." I shut my eyes. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But everything felt twisted now. "I don't know what to do, Em." My voice cracked. "I can't help you." She hesitated. "Maybe you can." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "If our parents lied about you, what else did they lie about?" A shiver ran down my spine. "What if you do have a biological family out there?" she continued. "What if one of them is a match?" I stared at the sidewalk, my mind racing. I had spent so many years thinking I had no one. But now, there was a chance, just a chance, that somewhere out there, I had a real family. And one of them might be able to save Emily's life. Emily's words echoed in my head long after we hung up. What if you do have a biological family out there? It had never crossed my mind before. I had spent years fighting to survive on my own, convinced I had no one. But now Now there was a real possibility that somewhere out there, people existed who were connected to me by blood. And one of them might be able to save Emily. But where did I even start? I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, but I had no other choice. So, I drove to the only place that might hold some answers, my parents' house. It felt strange pulling into their driveway after 7 years. The last time I stood on this porch, I was a teenager being told I was dead to them. Now, I wasn't even their son to begin with. I knocked, my stomach twisting with nerves. My dad opened the door, looking exhausted, but when he saw me, his expression lit up like I was some kind of savior. Jake! I held up a hand. I'm not here for you. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I need information. About where I came from. My mom was in the living room, her eyes red and swollen. She looked like she wanted to rush over and hug me, but she stopped herself. Jake, I don't want apologies, I snapped. I want the truth. Who are my biological parents? Silence. My dad shifted uncomfortably. My mom bit her lip. Tell me, or I walk out of here for good, I warned. Finally, my dad sighed. Your mother and I, we couldn't have kids at first. We tried everything. Then one day, we got a call about a newborn boy whose mother couldn't keep him. My heartbeat picked up. What was her name? We don't know. Don't lie to me, I growled. We don't, my mom insisted. It was a closed adoption. We never met her. All we know is that she was young, single, and she didn't want contact. I clenched my fists. There has to be something. My dad hesitated, then nodded toward the hallway. There's a box in the attic. Papers, old records. Maybe something useful. I didn't wait for permission. I stormed down the hall, yanked the attic ladder down, and climbed up. Dust swirled in the dim light as I searched through old boxes. And then, I found it. A worn cardboard box labeled Jake's adoption. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, I found old legal documents, hospital records, and then, buried underneath, a single handwritten note. His name is Jacob. Please give him a good life. I love him, but I can't keep him. H. I stared at the letter, my heart pounding. H. Whoever she was, she had given me life. And now, I needed to find her. Because she might be the key to saving Emily. I stared at the note, my fingers gripping the edges so tightly the paper nearly crumpled. H. That's all I had. No last name. No address. Just a single letter from a woman who gave me away. But it was something. And right now, something was enough. I took the note and the adoption papers, shoved them in my pocket, and climbed back down. My parents were waiting at the bottom of the ladder, their faces tight with guilt. Did you find anything? My mom asked hesitantly. I held up the note. Just this. Her eyes darted to the paper, then back to me. Jake, I'm leaving. I cut her off. And don't call me again unless it's about Emily. My dad sighed. Jake, please, But I was already walking out the door. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the adoption papers, searching for any clue that might lead me to my biological family. The documents were mostly legal jargon, but one thing stood out, a hospital name. St. Vincent's Medical Center. If I was born there, maybe they had records. Maybe they could tell me who H really was. It was a long shot, but at this point, I had no other leads. The next morning, I drove to St. Vincent's. The hospital had been renovated over the years, but the front desk still had that old, sterile feel. I approached the receptionist, an older woman with glasses perched on her nose. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was born here, and I'm looking for information about my birth mother. It was a closed adoption, but I was hoping there might be some records. She frowned. We don't typically release adoption records without legal approval. I expected that. I know, but it's an emergency. My sister, she needs a transplant. I just need a name. Please. The woman hesitated, then sighed. Give me a moment. She disappeared into a back room, and my heart pounded. If this didn't work, I had no idea what to do next. Minutes later, she returned with a file. I can't give you everything, but I can tell you your mother's full name. I held my breath as she read from the file. Her name was Hannah Mitchell. My pulse skyrocketed. A real name. A person. I had no idea where she was, if she was even still alive, but now I had something to go on. I thanked the receptionist and walked out of the hospital, my mind racing. I was one step closer to the truth. Now, I just had to find Hannah Mitchell. I sat in my car, staring at the name on my notepad. Hannah Mitchell. For the first time in my life, I had a real connection to where I came from. But I had no idea where to find her. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. Dozens of results popped up, too many to sort through. I needed something more specific. Then I remembered the adoption papers. I dug them out and scanned them again. St. Vincent's Medical Center. Birth year, 1980. Last known address. It was old, but it was a start. I typed the address into my GPS and drove off, hoping I wasn't too late. The drive felt like it took forever. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, run down but still lived in. I parked outside a small, weathered house and hesitated. What if she didn't live here anymore? What if she didn't want to see me? I shook off the doubt and walked up to the door. My heart pounded as I knocked. For a moment, nothing. Then, the door creaked open, and a woman appeared. She looked to be in her early 40s, tired eyes, lines of worry on her face. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. I swallowed hard. "Are you Hannah Mitchell?" She stiffened. "Who's asking?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Jake. I think you're my mother." Her face went pale. Hannah's grip tightened on the doorframe. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, in a shaky voice, she whispered, "Jake?" Hearing my name from her lips sent a strange chill through me. "Yeah," I said. "It's me." She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for years. I never thought." Her voice cracked. She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "How did you find me?" I held up the adoption papers. "Your name was on here. I had to look." She swallowed hard. "Why now?" There was no easy way to say it. "I have a sister. She's dying. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and I'm not a match. I was hoping maybe someone in my biological family could be." Her eyes widened. She gripped her arms, looking torn. Jake, I don't know if..." Before she could finish, the door behind her swung open. A teenage girl stood there, looking between us with confused eyes. "Mom? What's going on?" I froze. "Mom?" I wasn't an only child. I stared at the girl. She looked about 16, with the same dark eyes as me. My throat went dry. Hannah turned, her face full of panic. "Anna, go inside." But the girl, Anna, ignored her, her eyes locked onto me. "Who is he?" Hannah hesitated, then sighed. He's your brother." Anna's mouth fell open. "What? I have a brother?" She looked at me, then back at Hannah. "You never told me." I felt like I was in a dream. First, I found out my parents weren't really my parents. Now, I had a sister I never knew existed? Hannah looked like she might cry. "Anna, please, just go inside. I'll explain later." But Anna crossed her arms. "No. I want to know right now." I took a shaky breath. "I only found out about her a few days ago," I admitted. "I didn't know I was adopted until recently." Anna's face softened. "So, you didn't know about me either?" I shook my head. She looked at Hannah, hurt flashing in her eyes. "You told me it was always just us." Hannah rubbed her temples. "I was young. I had no choice back then." I clenched my fists. "You had a choice. You just never looked for me." Hannah flinched but didn't argue. Anna glanced between us, then back at me. "You said someone needed a transplant." "Who?" "My sister." I hesitated. "The girl I grew up with. She's dying." Anna's expression changed. "And you think maybe I could help?" Hannah's eyes widened. "Anna, no, we don't even know if..." But Anna ignored her. "How do we find out?" Hope flickered inside me. "A simple blood test." Hannah looked torn, but Anna nodded. "Then let's do it." For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger and confusion. I felt hope. The next morning, Anna and I sat in a clinic waiting room. She had insisted on coming despite Hannah's protests. I could tell my biological mother was still overwhelmed, but Anna, she seemed determined. When the nurse finally called her back, she gave me a small nod before disappearing behind the door. I exhaled, rubbing my face. It was surreal, finding a whole new family while trying to save the only sister I'd ever known. After what felt like forever, Anna walked back out. They said results take a day or two. I nodded. Thank you for doing this. She gave me a small smile. She's your sister. That kind of makes her my sister too, right? I wasn't sure what to say. This girl, a stranger just yesterday, already had more heart than the parents who raised me. Now, all we could do was wait. The wait for Anna's results felt endless. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, only for it to be something unimportant. Then, 2 days later, I got the call. I answered immediately. Hello? A nurse's voice came through. Jake? We have the results from Anna's test. I held my breath. And? She's a match. The air left my lungs. I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. You're sure? Yes. She's an excellent candidate for the transplant. I could barely think straight. After everything, the secrets, the betrayal, the chaos, there was still a chance to save Emily. I thanked the nurse and hung up. My hands were shaking as I called Anna. The second she picked up, I blurted. You're a match. She gasped. Wait, really? Yes, I said, my voice cracking. You can save her. There was silence, then a deep breath. Okay, she said firmly. Tell me what I need to do. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Relief. The day of the procedure came faster than I expected. Anna was calm, much calmer than I was, as she signed the final consent forms at the hospital. Hannah had come with her, hovering anxiously, while I paced the waiting room. Emily was already prepped for the transplant. When I visited her earlier, she looked hopeful for the first time in weeks. Are you sure she's okay with this? She had asked. She insisted. I told her. Now, I watched as Anna was led back to the procedure room. Before she disappeared through the doors, she looked over her shoulder at me. See you after? I nodded. See you after? And for the first time in years I realized, I wasn't just gaining a donor for Emily. I was gaining a sister too. The procedure went smoothly. The doctors said Emily's body would need time to accept the transplant, but they were optimistic. Anna was tired but in good spirits, joking that she deserved unlimited snacks for her heroic sacrifice. A week later, I sat by Emily's hospital bed as she smiled weakly at me. I can't believe it, she said. I have another sister. Yeah, I said, glancing at Anna, who was sitting cross-legged in the corner, eating a vending machine granola bar. Turns out she's pretty great. Anna smirked. Obviously. Emily laughed softly, then her expression turned serious. Jake, I know Mom and Dad hurt you. And I know finding out the truth was awful. But, she hesitated. I'm glad you found your real family. I looked between her and Anna, then thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the unexpected twists. She was right. My parents may have cut me off, but in the end, I gained something they could never take away. A real family. And for the first time in years I felt whole.